Ladies and gentlemen, life don't care how you feel. It don't pause for your heartbreak, your disappointment, your frustration. Life is going to come at you like a storm. And in that moment, when the wind is howling and the sky's dark, you got to decide, will you be led by how you feel or by what you know? See, everybody wants to win. Everybody wants success, legacy, peace, strength. But very few are willing to do the hard, internal work. The work that don't show up on your resume, that don't get applause. That's the mind work, that's discipline, that's focus. Because here's the truth, you can only win when your mind is stronger than your emotions. Let's talk about what that really means. Let's break it down. 5 truths, 5 keys to unlocking the warrior in your mind. You feel angry? That's a moment. You quit in that anger? That's a lifetime. And I don't say that lightly, because I've seen it too many times. People throwing away everything they've built, everything they've worked for, over a 5-minute feeling. You ever see somebody storm out of a meeting, slam the door, say something they can't take back? And for what? A bruise to the ego? A look they didn't like? A word that hit a nerve? That's emotion running the show. That's giving the keys of your future to a temporary storm. But here's the real tragedy. Not that the emotion showed up, but that the mind didn't step in. See, your emotions don't care about your goals. They don't care about your family, your dreams, your values. They care about one thing, right now: comfort, release, relief. Your emotions are short-term thinkers. Your mind is the long-game strategist. That's the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is emotional, response is intentional. And that difference can change your whole life. Let me take you back to this woman I met, Nadia. Young sister out of Chicago, sharp as a blade, worked her way up from intern to lead engineer, showed up early, stayed late, helped everybody. Then one day the promotion list comes out, her name's not on it. You know that feeling when your heart sinks? When it feels like your effort meant nothing? She told me. She sat in her car and cried. Not for 5 minutes, 2 hours. She was humiliated, confused, furious. Her hands were shaking. She said her first thought was, I'm done, I'm out, I gave everything, and they still didn't see me. Now right there, she had a choice. She could let that feeling write her resignation. She could let that heartbreak send the email, but she didn't. You know what she did? She let herself cry. She honored the pain, but she didn't act on it. That night, instead of quitting, she opened her laptop and started researching leadership training. Started identifying the skills that maybe, just maybe, she still needed to grow. And not even a week later, she signed up for an executive development course on her own dime. 6 months later, she led a high-profile launch. A year later, they made her VP. Same company, same office. The only difference? Her mind was in charge this time. See, people think strength is not feeling anything. That's not true. Strength is feeling everything and still choosing wisdom, still choosing vision, still choosing the mission. Because the mission ain't gonna wait for your feelings to calm down. Life's moving. Doors are opening and closing while you're sitting in your feelings. I'm not saying don't feel. I'm saying don't let those feelings sit in the driver's seat. I watched a young man once, high school senior, full scholarship to a top university. One argument with a coach, and he walked off the team. Not because he wasn't talented, not because he wasn't destined, but because in that moment, his pride was louder than his purpose. Years later, I asked him if he regretted it. He didn't even answer, just looked down. That silence said everything. Decisions made in emotion are often decisions made in error. You ever try to build a house during an earthquake? Can't do it. You wait. You let the ground settle. You let the shaking pass, then you build. Same thing with life. Don't build your decisions on emotional tremors. Let the ground steady. Let the mind speak. And this isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. It's about understanding that one wrong move made in the heat of the moment can cost you a decade or more. The text you send in anger, the job you walk out on in pride, the person you cut off in a storm of fear, the bridge you burn because your feelings caught fire. And when the smoke clears, you're left with ash and regret and no way back. So next time emotion comes rushing in, pause, breathe. Remember what you're building. Remember what you stand for. Ask yourself, is this a moment or a mission? Because a moment will pass, but a mission, if honored, will carry you into your future. Let your mind lead, and your life will follow. You ever wake up and just not feel like doing a single thing? Not getting out of bed? Not talking to anybody? Not facing your responsibilities? Not chasing your dreams? Of course you have. We all have. That feeling where your body's heavy, your mind's foggy, and your spirit's just tired. You lay there thinking about everything you should do, and yet all your emotions are dragging you in the opposite direction. That's real. But here's what separates the ones who win from the ones who just wish. They do it anyway. Discipline ain't about motivation. Motivation is nice. Motivation feels good, but it's not reliable. You can't build a life on motivation because motivation shows up on sunny days. Motivation likes comfort, but discipline don't care what the weather's like. Discipline don't care if it's raining. If your heart is hurting, if your feelings are shouting, not today. Discipline shows up anyway, every time. Discipline is doing what needs to be done, even when your emotions are pulling you toward the couch, the fridge, the bed, the easy road. It's setting your alarm for 5 o'clock amen. And when it goes off and your bed starts whispering, come on, just 5 more minutes. Discipline is the voice that says, no, we've got work to do. It's turning off the distractions, silencing the noise, and doing the thing that moves you forward, even when it's the last thing you want to do. And make no mistake, this isn't about being robotic. It's not about being cold or distant or heartless. It's about power. It's about self-respect. It's about knowing that your future, your peace, your legacy depends on what you do when nobody's watching, when the cameras are off, when there's no applause, no pat on the back, no immediate reward. That's where real strength is built. In silence, in repetition, in choosing the hard thing over the easy emotion. You think Serena Williams felt like training every single day of her life? You think she woke up every morning saying, I can't wait to run drills until my legs are on fire? No. She honored her discipline more than her comfort. That's how you win 23 Grand Slams. Not with wishful thinking, but with unshakable habits. She respected the process enough to do it when her emotions wanted nothing to do with it. That's the difference. I knew a young man once. Bright kid, full of dreams. Said he wanted to be a writer. Told me he had stories inside him that would change lives. I said, all right, so write. He said, I'm waiting to feel inspired. I told him, you'll be waiting a long time, my friend. Inspiration might knock once a week, but discipline sits outside your door every morning at 6 o'clock. You let discipline in, and you'll find that inspiration comes around a whole lot more often. We've created a world that chases ease, that celebrates impulse, that tells you if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. But feelings lie. Discipline tells the truth. Emotions will have you thinking you're stuck when all you need to do is take one more step. Emotions will have you quitting in the middle of the race when the finish line is just around the corner. Discipline says, keep going. And the beauty of discipline, it's not something you're born with. It's something you build. Like a muscle, you don't start by climbing mountains. You start by doing one hard thing today, then another tomorrow, and then another. Over time, it becomes who you are. Not someone who waits to feel ready, someone who's ready because they prepared. I had a woman tell me once, "I wish I had your discipline." I said, "No, you don't need mine. You just need to stop giving your emotions the final say. Because deep down, you already know what needs to be done. The problem is, your feelings keep voting against it. And every time you let them win, you weaken the part of you that was born to lead, born to build, born to endure. So next time you don't feel like it, whatever it is, pause for a moment and remind yourself that every great life was built by someone who did what had to be done, regardless of how they felt. Because success doesn't belong to the emotional, it belongs to the disciplined. And discipline is your path through chaos. It's your anchor in the storm. It's the voice inside that says, "I don't feel like it, but I'm doing it anyway." You can be the smartest person in the building. You can know the numbers, recite the books, ace the tests, hold 3 degrees on your wall. But if you can't manage yourself, your mouth, your attitude, your ego, then all that knowledge turns into noise. Just noise. See, intelligence might open the door, but emotional intelligence is what keeps you in the room. That's what people don't always tell you. You don't rise because you know the most. You rise because you know yourself the best. You know how many brilliant people I've seen get passed over? Not because they weren't smart, they were brilliant, but because they couldn't control their temper. Because every meeting turned into a showdown. Because the slightest bit of criticism made them crumble or explode. Because they couldn't read the room, couldn't feel the energy, couldn't listen, and they never figured it out. They kept blaming other people, kept talking about how unfair the world is, when the truth is, they were a genius with no handle on their emotions. And that, my friend, is like handing a toddler a loaded weapon. It's dangerous. Emotional intelligence is the power that don't need to raise its voice. It's what shows up when pressure's high and people are watching and you stay centered. It's knowing how to take a breath when you really want to throw a punch. It's walking away from an insult without dragging your dignity through the mud. It's learning how to respond instead of react. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. You ever been in a room with someone who's just calm? Not because they don't feel things, but because they've mastered the ability to own their space? You can feel it. Their energy is grounded. They don't jump to defend themselves. They don't try to prove anything. They just listen, observe, speak when necessary. And when they speak, people listen. Not because they're the loudest, but because their words carry weight. You want to know why? Because that calm, that's earned. That calm comes from a place of knowing who you are and not letting outside chaos control your inner peace. Now, let me break this down a little more. Emotional intelligence is understanding the difference between what's yours and what's theirs. You walk into work, someone throws an attitude at you, it's not personal, it's theirs. Maybe they had a rough morning, maybe they're going through something, maybe they're just not emotionally mature yet. Your job isn't to match their energy, your job is to protect yours. When you understand that, when you stop absorbing other people's moods like a sponge, you start to level up. Harvard Business Review ran a study. It's not speculation, it's data. They found that 90% of top performers, not average workers, but top performers, had one thing in common: high emotional intelligence. Not the highest IQ, not the best resume, but the highest level of emotional mastery. These are the people who know how to manage conflict, how to lead a team, how to keep their cool when things fall apart. They're not perfect. They just know how to pause, how to choose their next move. That pause, that's where power lives. I knew a man once, ran a small business, nothing flashy, but it was his. Hired this young guy, brilliant kid, fresh out of college. The kid was sharp, quick, had ideas for days. But every time someone challenged him, he snapped. Every time a customer didn't agree with him, he got defensive, couldn't take feedback, took everything personal. And within 6 months, he was gone. Not because he wasn't smart, because he didn't know how to work with people, didn't know how to check his ego. And the truth is, your talent will get you in the door. But if your emotions run wild, that door will hit you on the way out. See, the real strength, the kind that builds teams, builds marriages, builds communities, that strength comes from emotional clarity. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present enough to know what you're feeling and not let it run the show. You ever have a conversation where someone's just waiting to respond? Not listening, just waiting for their turn to talk? That's not intelligence. That's insecurity with a loud microphone. Real emotional intelligence listens, learns, adapts. You don't need to be the loudest in the room. I'm telling you, stop chasing volume. Start chasing stillness. Because when people get loud, they're usually trying to cover up fear. When people get defensive, they're usually hiding something inside they haven't dealt with. But when someone can stay calm, even when they're being challenged, even when they're being disrespected, even when the heat is on, that's someone who's done the work. And don't think for a second that calm means weak. Calm is control. Calm is knowing you have the power, but you choose not to swing it around carelessly. Calm is saying, I know who I am, and I don't need to prove it to you. That's the kind of presence that shifts a room. That's the kind of leadership people remember. So yeah, you can be smart, you can be genius, but until you learn how to manage your feelings, how to carry yourself in chaos, how to lead with patience instead of pride, you're not tapping into your real potential. Because real intelligence starts with understanding yourself. And once you master that, everything else begins to fall into place. Some of you have been through hell. I can see it before you even say a word. You wear it in your posture, in how you guard your heart, in the way your eyes shift when people ask you personal questions. I see it in how hard you work, how you never ask for help, how you carry everything on your back like it's normal. But I want to tell you something right now, and I need you to hear it in your bones. Your pain is not your identity. It's not your name. It's not your story, and it's not your final chapter. Pain is real. It's sharp. It's heavy. And sometimes it stays longer than it should. But it is information, not definition. It tells you where it hurts, what needs healing, where your boundaries are. But it doesn't get to tell you who you are. That's your job. That's your mind's job. We all have a story. We've all been broken somewhere. Some of you were abandoned. Some of you were abused, overlooked, underestimated, betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you. And that kind of pain, it cuts deep. It can make you believe that broken is the only thing you'll ever be. That's what emotion does. It screams, this is who I am now. This pain, this shame, this fear, this is me. But it's a lie. And if you keep letting that lie play in your head, you start to wear it like a badge. You start building your life around your wounds instead of your healing. Let me tell you about a man who sat in a prison cell, angry, ashamed, bitter. That man was broken, no direction, no purpose, just years of pain boiling over into bad decisions. But one day he picked up a book, then another, and what happened next wasn't magic. It was discipline. He used his mind to begin cleaning the mess that emotion left behind. That man became Malcolm X. He didn't erase his pain, he transformed it. He didn't run from the fire, he learned how to walk through it with his head up. He didn't let pain tattoo itself on his soul. He let it shape his purpose. See, when your emotions are in charge, you stay in survival mode. You build walls, not bridges. You react, not respond. You cling to the pain because it feels familiar, because it's been there longer than the healing has. But survival mode ain't living. It's a cage, and the lock is inside your own mind. The moment you decide that you're more than what happened to you, you start to take your power back. You ever see somebody who's been through it, and instead of being bitter, they're wise? Instead of being angry, they're peaceful? That didn't happen overnight. That's not because the pain disappeared. That's because they chose not to let it define them. They said, this hurt me, yes, but it's not who I am. It's what I've been through, and I'm still standing. That choice right there, that's the mind stepping up. That's leadership of self. That's real strength. And don't think for a second that using your mind means you ignore the pain. No, you feel it. You acknowledge it. You say, yes, this happened. Yes, it broke something in me. But then you do something radical. You keep going. You put one foot in front of the other. You start building again. Even with shaky hands, you show up to life even when your heart's still bleeding. And that's not fake. That's courage. That's purpose. That's letting your mind, not your emotions, write the next page. There's this lie floating around that if you pretend you're okay, you're strong. No. Real strength is not pretending. It's saying, I'm hurt, but I'm still here. I'm tired, but I still believe there's something for me on the other side of this. Because there is. There's a life beyond the trauma, beyond the heartbreak, beyond the disappointment. But you'll only see it when you stop letting pain be the author of your story. So the next time your hurt tries to speak for you, tries to tell you that you're not enough, that you're damaged, that you're beyond repair, I want you to pause, breathe, and let your mind take the mic. Let it remind you of every time you didn't give up, every day you kept going, every setback you survived. That's not weakness, that's resilience. You're not the pain, you're the person who lived through it. That's your identity, that's who you are. Not the wound, but the warrior. Emotions will always whisper in your ear, take it easy. They'll tell you to slow down when you should be pushing through. They'll tell you to spend now and worry later, to react now and regret later, to quit now and explain it away later. Emotions want comfort, and they want it now. They're not thinking about 5 years from now. They're thinking about 5 minutes from now. Emotions want relief, but your mind, your disciplined, trained, purpose-driven mind, it wants legacy. And legacy ain't built in moments of comfort. It's built in the hard choices. The ones you make when nobody's clapping for you. The ones you make when your back is sore, your heart is heavy, but your vision is still alive. See, the mind is your architect. The mind says, let's build something that lasts. It's your planner, your coach, your compass. It sees beyond the now. It sees what could be. It says, don't just live for this moment. Live for what this moment could mean down the line. Because the truth is, your legacy isn't in what you say. It's not in what you feel. It's in what you do day after day when the excitement has worn off and all that's left is your commitment. I once watched a bricklayer at work on a cold morning, hands rough, face weathered. It was drizzling, just enough to make most people go home. But there he was, laying brick after brick. Not fast, not flashy, but consistent, focused. And I asked him, why not wait for the rain to pass? He looked up, smiled, and said, because the house don't care about the weather. It only cares that I keep building. That stuck with me. Because life is like that. Legacy is like that. It doesn't care if you're tired, or sad, or tempted to quit. It only remembers whether or not you kept laying bricks. Now, I'm not saying emotions don't matter. They do. They give us color, connection, compassion, but you can't build your house on them. You ever try to build on sand? That's what emotions are. Shifting, sinking, unstable. They change with the wind. One bad conversation, one bad day, and you're ready to burn everything down. That's why the mind has to take the lead. Because your feelings don't care about your future, but your mind does. Your feelings will say, don't go to the gym today, you're tired. But your mind says, you made a promise to yourself, keep it. Your feelings will say, ignore that call, you're still mad. But your mind says, make peace while you still have time. Your feelings will say, buy it now, you deserve it. But your mind says, save it, invest it, build something that your kids' will benefit from. That's the difference. Emotion looks at today, the mind builds for tomorrow. Think about all the people you admire, not the famous ones, but the real ones. The grandmother who raised 5 children by herself. The teacher who showed up early and stayed late for years without ever asking for recognition. The man who grew up with nothing but made sure his kids had everything they needed. These are people who let the mind lead, who didn't fold every time emotion knocked on the door. They made hard choices. They delayed comfort. They sacrificed what felt good in the moment for what would matter in the end. That's what legacy requires. It requires you to be uncomfortable sometimes, to be misunderstood, to be disciplined when it would be easier to be distracted. Legacy says, I'm not chasing a feeling, I'm chasing a future. That future could be financial freedom. It could be a family that's healed from generations of pain. It could be a business that provides jobs for your community. It could be a book, a song, a movement, a memory. But it all starts with one decision: to let your mind lead when your emotions want to run the show. Dr. Maya Angelou said, we may encounter many defeats, but we must not be defeated. That's not just a quote. That's a mindset. That's someone who understood that loss doesn't make you a loser. Struggle doesn't make you weak. Defeat only becomes permanent if you stop building. So when defeat shows up, and it will, don't let your emotions take the wheel. Let your mind step up and say, this is part of the process. We keep going. Brick by brick, day by day. You build something that lasts. You build not just a name, but a standard. Not just comfort, but character. Not just success, but significance. And when you're gone, people won't remember every emotion you felt. They'll remember what you stood for, what you built. That's legacy. And it starts in your mind. So I leave you with this. You are not your fear. Let me say that again so it gets past your ears and into your spirit. You are not your fear. That shaking in your hands, that voice in your head telling you, what if I fail? What if they laugh? What if I'm not enough? That's not you. That's your fear trying to hijack the wheel. And fear's real. Let's not pretend it's not, but it's not the driver. It doesn't get to choose your direction unless you hand it the key. Don't give it that kind of power. Fear will always show up, but it doesn't get a vote unless you let it speak louder than your purpose. You are not your anger. I know life has pushed some of you hard. I know betrayal, injustice, loss. They've tried to plant anger like a seed in your soul. And maybe you walk around with it under the surface, always simmering, always ready to rise. But hear me, you are not your anger. You're not defined by how someone mistreated you. You're not the worst thing that ever happened to you. You're the person who gets to decide what happens next. And that decision, that belongs to your mind, not your fury. You are not your sadness. Yes, the weight can be heavy. Life can break your heart in places no one ever sees. Maybe you smile for the world, but cry behind closed doors. Maybe you've known quiet suffering, and it's worn you thin. But even that deep sorrow, even that ache, It's not the sum of you. It's something you've carried, not who you are. You are the one strong enough to carry it. You are the one strong enough to carry it. You are the one strong enough to carry it. Still breathing, still hoping. That's strength, not weakness. You are the master of them. And I know that sounds big, maybe even impossible. But mastery doesn't mean you never feel. It means you feel and choose anyway. It means when fear tells you to hide, you still step forward. When anger begs for vengeance, you still choose peace. When sadness clouds your eyes, you still look up and find light. Mastery doesn't silence emotion, it guides it. It puts the mind in the captain's seat. Train your mind. I'm not talking about a motivational poster or some cute slogan. I mean daily, relentlessly, like a warrior preparing for battle. Because emotion is going to come knocking. It always does. It will come in the form of exhaustion, of doubt, of temptation, of old wounds. You can't avoid it, but you can be ready for it. You can train your mind to say, not today. I see you, but you don't control me. And when that moment comes, and it will, when the storm rolls in and your heart starts racing and your hands get heavy and that voice says, just give up, that's when you look emotion in the eye and say, you don't run me. I'm on mission. See, this life, it's not about how you feel on your best day. It's about how you stand on your worst. Anybody can smile when the sun's out, but when the rain comes, when the pressure's on, that's where champions are born. That's where legacies are built, not in the ease, but in the endurance, not in the applause, but in the silence. When it's just you, your pain, and your decision. Because you don't win by being emotional. You don't win by giving every impulse a voice. You don't win by chasing comfort or letting fear write your future. You win when your mind becomes your general. When you can pause in the chaos and hear that still, clear voice say, keep going. When your thoughts stand taller than your doubts. When your principles stand firmer than your feelings. When your clarity is louder than your cravings. You win when your discipline becomes your armor. When you do what you said you'd do, especially when it's hard. When you keep showing up to the gym, to the meeting, to the grind. When every part of you wants to stay in bed. You win when your integrity outlasts your emotion. When your consistency becomes louder than your excuses. That's armor. That's protection. That's how you walk through fire without burning up. You win when your vision becomes your compass. When you stop making decisions based on how you feel and start making them based on where you're going. When your dreams are so loud that they drown out the drama. When you choose purpose over panic. When your future pulls you forward, even when the past tries to pull you back. Only then do you truly win. Not because you never cried, not because you never got scared, but because your mind stood firm when your heart got heavy, because your vision stood strong when the world tried to blur it, because you chose growth when comfort was easier, because you chose legacy when relief was right there waiting. And that's the kind of victory no one can take from you. Thank you.